Since the Canon R5's official release, we have heard a cannon full of mega-picky critiques about this 45 megapixel beast of a camera. And let's be honest, while some of it is genuine analysis, a lot of it is just designed to get views and clicks. I don't normally make videos like this, but I love cameras and I'm really excited about what's happening in the camera industry right now. And the purpose of this video is not to defend Canon. If they drop the ball on something and another company like Sony delivers, then by all means I think people should use whichever tool is best for them. My biggest gripe with Canon right now is with what they're not telling us, or at least with what they're not doing what I think is a good enough job of explaining clearly in a way that would cool some of the more overheated heads that are out there at the moment. So let's think of what most people have been asking for from Canon since the release of the EOS R in terms of video features. The three biggest things have been uncropped 4K, IBIS, and dual card slots. Do you know what the R5 has and the R6? Uncropped 4K, IBIS, and dual card slots. So literally all of the things that people have spent the last few years complaining about, just check one by one. They're all checked. Canon delivered everything that the community was asking for. But this is where I wish Canon were a little more vocal and aggressive about explaining a few things. This little line right here on their spec sheet is very important. 4K 30 is not affected by heat. And just to clarify, 4K 30 does include 24 frames a second. And this is huge. That means the R5 shoots uncropped 4K without any issues for overheating. And it says specifically on that spec sheet for weddings and interviews, the things that people have been complaining the R5 might not be best for. There still is that 30-minute recording limit, which is admittedly weird, and I'm gonna talk about that in a minute or two. But even though this camera shoots uncropped 4K, I've seen people poo-poo it because it uses line skipping and pixel binning, which by the way are two entirely separate methods. If you need a refresher or you're not familiar with how they work and what the difference is, I really recommend this video from Gerald Undone to get you up to speed and understand what the difference is. But basically, pixel binning can still deliver outstanding results. There's really nothing wrong with it. All that it's doing is reducing the processing power needed by the camera to handle all of that information, which means the camera will be less prone to overheating. So pixel binning is what allows us to have 4K uncropped without overheating from a 45 megapixel sensor. And from everything I can tell, that 4K quality is gonna be basically the same as what is on the existing EOS R, which even though it's cropped, the 4K itself is really high quality. The R does 480 megabits per second and the R5 is gonna do regular 4K at 470 megabits per second, I believe, but for all intents and purposes, you should expect about the same quality. I normally film with the EOS R like right now at 1080 and then I upscale it in Final Cut Pro to 4K. But if I overlay some native 4K shots filmed with the EOS R right here, you should be able to see a noticeable improvement in clarity and sharpness and just overall image quality. So that 4K 30 that doesn't overheat is going to give great results, and that is, again, what everyone was asking for the past 2 years. So instead of hating on the 8K limitations, I think we should appreciate the 4K because it's definitely better than no K, which is okay by me. Now, as I mentioned, we are still limited by that 30-minute recording limit, which for me isn't usually an issue personally because I don't usually record longer than 30 minutes at a time. And even if the opportunity presented itself, I don't really like having hour-long video files because if something goes wrong in that file, the whole thing is ruined. So breaking something up into smaller chunks is kind of a safety precaution to make sure everything doesn't get damaged all at once. And if you're unaware, it's basically the result of a weird tax law about camera classifications that went away in 2019. So it's actually not a law anymore. But remember, camera companies work on these cameras for years to develop them, not just a couple weeks or a couple of months. So part of my hope is that this 30-minute record limit is actually just a leftover residual artifact from when they started developing this camera and that law was still on the books, which means maybe it will go away in the future. And typically I wouldn't bank on big changes like that happening with a camera or with a lineup, but Canon really needs the RF cameras to succeed. They have put all of their eggs in that basket, and up until now there have only been 2 bodies that use the RF system. and neither of them could do uncropped 4K. So the R5 and the R6, Canon needs those to succeed. And they've already mentioned that they're actually working on a firmware update to add in a few features and switch around a few things to make the cameras even better than when they were officially announced. And this is before they're actually released and available. And that is important because Sony is about to do something really big. The A7S Mark III is scheduled to be announced at the end of this month, just a couple of days before the first batch of R5s are set to ship out to people who ordered them. And my dog is so excited about that. So this is my tinfoil hat conspiracy theory of what I think might happen over the next few weeks. And of course, this is all just my personal speculation, but Canon made a lot of headlines by announcing the R5 and the R6, and they've been getting a lot of attention ever since then. Sony is about to drop this absolutely insane camera for people who are interested in doing video especially, and that is clearly going to dominate the headlines right as the R5 begins to ship. So I don't think it's too unreasonable, considering how much Canon needs these cameras to succeed, to think that after the Sony a7S III is announced, Canon might announce or post their firmware update, which they've already said will include things like all-eye compression for the R6, 120 frames per second in full HD on the R5, and maybe a few other cool things. What about regular 4K 60 that doesn't overheat maybe? What about getting rid of that 30-minute recording limit? That's pure speculation, but at this point it wouldn't really surprise me to see Canon shoot for this, I don't know, sports, hit for the, like, at this point, it wouldn't surprise me to see Canon do something really impressive like that, because it's going to shift the attention back to them after the Sony announcement, and it's also going to happen right as people in the real world are getting production models of the R5 in their hands, and then they will be able to test that stuff out immediately. So it could be a way for Canon to get some of that attention back. Of course, this is just my theory. I could be entirely wrong. It wouldn't be the first time, and it definitely won't be the last time I've been wrong about things. So regardless of what happens, it's gonna be really fun to see how this plays out over the rest of the summer. But while it is fun to play that comparison game between different cameras and different companies, I do just wanna reiterate that in 2020, the options that are available to us are absolutely incredible. I don't think you can go wrong with any camera. There are definitely some that suit certain needs better than others, but you can't make a wrong choice. Canon, Sony, Panasonic, whatever, Olympus, they're all great options that can deliver great results. And of course, none of these cameras are inexpensive, so the best thing to do if you're thinking of purchasing one is to wait until those real-world objective reviews are out from people who have been using the cameras in actual situations in their lives. But if everyone waits, then who's gonna do those reviews?